Hey, this is Kate. You're listening to the Beyond Ray podcast. Today, we are having an interesting conversation about that tightrope that designers have to walk between real authenticity and sort of the hive mind perfect presentation. I mean, we'll talk about it, but what's so interesting is that it's like authenticity is demanded, but only within a really perfect range.
Yeah.
Like you have to be original. You just have to be original correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like today we're going to talk about how you have to be authentic, but not too authentic. Hey everyone, quick announcement before we start this episode. We've got an in-person event coming up for those of you in the Seattle area. Catch Design Detours Thursday, June 13th, starting at 6:30 p.m. at Tactile. Ticket to this event gets you free food with an open bar. You can get a discount for your ticket if you attend the student shows that are coming up and find our hidden discount codes. The student shows are May 30th at the UW Waterfront Activities Center, June 5th at the Jacob Lawrence Art Gallery, and June 6th at Tactile in downtown. Find out more details on our social media, WID_Seattle on Instagram. Yeah, today it's just us, the hosts. I'm Ginger. We have Margaret with us as well, and we have Kate.
It would be probably worth it to say, how did this topic even come up?
Yeah, well, so in the spirit of authenticity, then, not super easy to get a guest all the time. So we don't have a guest for May, but we still have plenty to talk about. And I think this came up because we're always looking for things that frustrate us or make us question what we're doing, what's happening. And it's nice we have this opportunity to talk to each other about it, which doesn't always happen for everyone, that you don't have other designers around you that you feel safe, admitting certain things.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, part of it.
Yeah.
And then finding out, as we have for many topics, that there are some semi-universal experiences. So first of all, that's just kind of comforting. And then beyond that, maybe we can try to figure out something to do about it. Maybe the awareness and talking about it is the first step.
Yeah, to take it out of our heads and realize, oh, is everyone else feeling this way, or is it just me being psychotic?
And the answer is no psychosis.
No psychosis. Very common shared experience. It's really nice when we get an opportunity to have no guest for a moment, actually, because there's just plenty that we've kind of discovered with one another that we think is still relevant to the audience. And so today, one of the things that was really coming up for us frequently was this persona that designers sometimes feel pressure to put on, that it is sort of challenging to be either basic or too out there, and that you have to really thread the needle of having a particular aesthetic, a particular way you present yourself, a particular set of hobbies and interests that are just perfect. So to turn it over to one of you, do you agree that people really try to keep up appearances in our field?
Yes. I feel self-conscious around other designers. And there's a bunch of design events coming up soon. I think maybe it's tough in a artistic, creative field where, as an artist or creative, how you present yourself to the world is supposed to say something about yourself, and by extension, about your work. So that's the sensitivity. And then you're aware that everyone in the same field has the same skills or astuteness. So I don't know if we really are just being too hard on ourselves, or we really are in danger of being judged sometimes.
And to be fair, what you just described, that might sound like a harsh environment where you need to check yourself, not only the work you do, but also anything around. It has some privileges. We talked before, that if you work on the Wall Street, or if you are in any office job that requires a dress code, it's not part of it. But you also really sometimes have to hide your personality, be just cookie cutter, look like everyone else, be super professional. Sometimes you may let other people know what you're into and who you are in your free time, but work is work. There is a persona, very clear dress code. It's great that we don't have it, that we can experiment with trends, we can sometimes wear something weird to work, but have conversations about it and inspire each other instead of having weird looks. But also it's created this environment that you need to look in certain way. It's like balancing between professionalism, being cool, knowing what's going on, being artsy. It doesn't really have much to do with your work, but it's almost expected from you that you're some kind of like cool individual.
If you do use something that you authentically like as part of your appearance or personality, like if you have like a funky hobby and then people react poorly, then I don't know, when you feel bad, like, oh, that's like a bad hobby to have. It's not reinforcing because, like, of course you want to be liked and accepted.
What's an example that you've experienced?
It's funny because you can hear examples for like things that are the opposite of each other. So I've heard, oh, designers should be able to utilize color in their life, like in their outfits, in the things that they own. And then people being like, it's much cooler and designy to have like neutrals or things in black and white or something like that. Those are diametrically opposed. And then you also feel burdened by like, okay, am I a designer if I wear colors really well, or am I a designer if I wear black, and or does it not matter?
Something you just made me think of, we've had this conversation already a little bit, and it's been very much focused on our experiences or other designers' experiences. But like, I know that I'll just say my family, like, they like their own taste, but they feel really shy or like, I think, quick to feel judged or embarrassed about their taste when I'm there. It's nice that, my parents, if they're like changing out some furniture or some sort of thing in their house, they want my input. But I also think that they, and maybe other people, like quickly assume that I need a space to be like pristine and perfect and sexy, like if I show up in it. And the fact that it maybe isn't is like letting me down.
When it's like, no,
Yeah.
it's for it's your space. Do whatever you want. Do what makes you happy. Like, it turns out it's just nice for people to feel good, and we are not the arbiters of everything good.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting because even non-designers actually feel that judgment by nature of interacting with somebody who theoretically is, an arbiter of taste or whatever, which I definitely don't think of myself as, but being a designer is, right? So we feel it from other designers, but also maybe other people feel it just when they know what we do or anything like that.
I think
Yeah.
everyone always feels a little bit self-conscious. Like that's human experience. Also, I feel like I don't want this conversation to go in the bad direction because right now, like we're kind of complaining that we have this possibility to be more expressive at work and we don't have to wear blazers every day, like bankers. I keep talking about banks, but my sister works in a bank and she always asks me like, can I get this or can I get that? Like when she's like shopping because she has a dress code and I'm always like, what's dress code? But I think like what made me think about the subject that we talk right now is that I feel that people, not everyone is like really their authentic self, that people try to be these individuals and, so honest. But when you start talking to them or like looking at them, it comes out sometimes that this is just a pose. And I hate the idea that like we try to be perceived differently.
Yeah, it's like putting up a front, right? It's not actually who you are. It's just kind of like a version of you that is acceptable, and hope people are distracted by that.
How I feel is that to me, it's that who you are is not enough. And I would be happy to like work and interact with people and accept them exactly for who they are. And to me, it's more interesting than to go through those facades, which also make me self-conscious because I look at myself and I think like, oh, I'm not good enough for this crowd.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Kind of going back to what Kate was saying about like the people who feel self-conscious around us, that it's our family or friends because they know that we deal in aesthetics.
Oh, I love that way of phrasing it.
This like probably semi-universal effect of like any kind of creative field because you have taste making. I'm gonna be like a little sappy because like Brian, my partner, is a musician. He did the music for the podcast. So and like one of the things that I really love about Brian and like why I feel very safe around him, and this sounds kind of maybe silly, but like I like listening to music and I enjoy music, but I'm not a professional musician. I didn't go through deep pedagogical study of music and music theory. Like I stopped in college because design as a course of study is pretty all consuming. But like it's kind of hard to find musician friends and talk to them about like everyday music or like music that isn't cool or for the music nerds or people who are highly educated in that way. And I've definitely had that feeling with just friends, and I'm still friends with them, but it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to talk about that thing because it's not interesting to them. But it then means that, like, I'm going to share less of me because some of those other things that I like them, but we can't have a conversation about it. But I can have that conversation with Brian. I think that's pretty rare, unfortunately. But if we can be more open to stuff like that and then make people feel safe about the things they like, they'll share more of themselves with us.
Yeah. I think it's really speaks to just a general principle, which I feel is true in my life or with people that I like, which is that it's easier to build deep relationship based on like shared positive things, like things you love, than it is to build relationship on like just complaining about stuff. Because you actually, when you both just complain about a lot of things, all you have in common is complaining. Versus when you like are sharing something positive, obviously you have like the thing that you both love, and so then you can keep exploring it together and like building, right, and building more curiosity. I think that it's a really good point you're making about the social pressures that are sometimes at play in design to be uniform rob us of the opportunity to build like more diverse community, and also just like more curious community that like really like would allow us to make more space for people, be more inclusive.
Yeah, and like we're already kind of departing from strictly how we present and look and just getting into interests already. I feel like that's kind of a natural progression. And it's funny that we would feel limited or make others feel limited because I think design thrives on making these like disparate connections. So if you're into something that doesn't seem related to the product you work on, suddenly something from that world and industry could be relevant, could be useful in your product. And if we are always like kind of poo-pooing certain things that seem strange or not cool initially, we'll miss out on those opportunities as well. But somehow certain things have found their home in like, these are proper hobbies to have. It's cool to have this hobby. It's designerly. I think I was gonna ask you guys, like, were you drawn to doing certain things because of design?
I have a hard time telling if all of the different hobbies I do where I make things are, I mean, they feel pretty authentic to me, but I also think now for 10 or 11 years, there's been a lot of like positive reinforcement that those hobbies are the ones that like fit best with the way I claim my brain works. Like a lot about like who I am and my identity in my profession too. And so it's hard for me to tell which thing influenced which, or like if I would have continued pushing so much into these particular hobbies and like refining them, if there wasn't like some point of pride about my character that it gave me that has to do a lot with industry stuff.
That's kind of funny and scary to think about it not being easily recognizable, that like it's just
Yeah.
affecting you without you noticing.
I mean, I love doing it. Like, don't get me wrong, I really, really like doing pottery and sewing and all these things. I just don't really know how much that's like informed by the identity that I am also like trying to build. You know what I mean? It's hard to figure out the order of operations. I don't do render weekly, which I know is a hot take for Margaret on this question.
I don't do render weekly. I just know that some people do.
No, but your opinion about render weekly being like a hobby that I feel like almost makes you angry.
Maybe because I'm jealous because I don't do it. I sit on my lazy ass and don't do rendering. I didn't have regarding like hobbies. Like obviously I notice a lot. I notice a lot of things, but something about my own hobby. Because I do cutesy children book style illustrations.
They're so cute.
They're cute. I'm proud of them, but they're cute. And it doesn't really fit industrial design. I talked about it to someone and they were like, super supportive and was like, oh yeah, beautiful stuff. But we agreed that there is type of illustrations that go well with industrial design portfolio. For example, like drawn on iPad, like liminal spaces, empty city at night, robots, more like concept art, illustration, maybe watercolors. This goes with industrial design. My cute animals, which are like, I'm like inspired by a lot of illustrators who do work on books for children, and like this is style I wanted to pursue because I like it. This does not go well with industrial design. My illustration next to the like photos of product I work with, this doesn't mix, and it's weird. I had this thought that like, or maybe I should change my style, or maybe I should get into something different and something else because it doesn't fit to me as industrial designer, or like this doesn't build up my industrial design portfolio. I almost felt like whatever like creative hobby I do, it must be giving more credits to my everyday work. But I was honest with myself. I was saying absolutely not, because this would defeat the purpose why I even started.
Do we feel like designers aren't really allowed to have too much cute? Is that not designerly?
I think so.
I think cute. It's just like I think what you said about like hand done maybe though, or more drawn on like an iPad or something. Like so I think, and I'm calling her out totally positively. This is not a critique, but like Silent Lines, right, is the account of Kay Kim, who's an industrial designer here. And I feel like her Instagram page for that art kind of exemplifies like what type of work goes along with an industrial design portfolio. Like it's all really precise. It's all sort of like these beautiful blocks of color. There is like personality to it. But it almost is like it's just so perfectly executed, in a way that like, yeah, I agree with you, Margaret. Like sewing is my comparison. And like I do learn a lot from sewing that I think would help me with any sort of soft goods work, but I'm not approaching it in the same technical way that like some people's accounts do or like some people's presentation of that types of work does. It's like it's cuter, it's more femme, it's like prettier, and it's also a little bit more like homemade looking, like even the way that I post just like photos of me wearing my clothes as opposed to like very sterile environments.
Well, I think these aesthetics that are more homey, more craft,
Mm-hmm.
they're feminized and they're not produced like a lot of design things, like this idea of like mass producing or something that's like repeatable.
Mm.
And I feel like the repeatability somehow makes it into a product and then that gives it legitimacy versus if you just make like a one-off, it's like a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not design. And that gets into that like is art design, is design art conversation. And you make people very angry with that debate perhaps.
I don't have a dog in that fight.
I don't think I do either.
Oh my gosh.
I think I feel so sad about this idea of something like an art style or that you do that is so personal too, right? Like you just enjoy doing it and it's beautiful, but that you feel self-conscious about it. Like even though we're taught to be like not very precious about our ideas and drawings because it's just for work, like you just do this as your process.
Mm-hmm.
It's still inevitably like kind of personal. I remember one time my design drawings were called cartoony. I was like, oh fuck. Like I could never let that go. And I'm always a little self-conscious about like, oh well, do I just look like that kid that like draws anime again?
Mm.
Do you feel like products you work on also reflect on how people may perceive you as a designer?
I feel like it could. Like, especially if you worked on something really cool, then maybe people would think of that when they think of you. It's hard for me to say because the stuff that I work on isn't for consumers. So, like, most people don't just like use it in their everyday life.
How did Fluke get such a strong design team though? Like it's actually quite interesting for a product that is so niche or is not like, yeah, I don't know. I'm actually just really intrigued by that history. Like why you guys.
Why are you asking this question? Do you think that like good designers, like very good designers, would not want to work on the product that isn't going like widely to consumers?
It's not that designers wouldn't want to work on it. I'm actually intrigued by the fact that there is money in it, like that the business interests aligned to have good design on that product. And I think that what that shows me, like internally, is that I think that a lot of the time, even though I think that design could apply to every product and could make a huge difference in something like a multimeter or the work that Ginger does, I think that a lot of times companies are not gonna prioritize good design unless they need like the sex appeal of product that comes from like consumers caring about the visual branded like attractive element.
Right. And I think that in the case of Fluke, it does go back to like the founding of the company that that person understood that design was important and was differentiating and was supportive and then was able to get designers working on it that built a very strong brand, like that they also believed in the product. It was just like a good matchup that like that belief of design is good and worthwhile paid off. And
Yeah.
when you see it pay off, then it's like, okay, you have something to keep building on.
And I'm definitely not surprised that designers would keep going to work on that product because it's like you guys have established that the business cares about design, like that it will be in the process, and there's sort of this like design mentorship happening on higher, like older and younger levels that helps it keep working well. I think all of that is really relevant too. But yeah, I mean, on the overarching question of product, yeah, I think, yeah, designers.
I think it can be hard to build that into a product that doesn't have the sex appeal. Like if you started a new company and then you made multimeters, but it didn't already have a design group, and then like maybe people wouldn't believe that that's important. But people do believe that industrial design is important for making headphones and like sexy products like that.
Right.
You would never like release headphones to the market and not have an industrial designer touch it.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there is many headphones in the market that weren't touched by industrial designer.
That's
Maybe they were not
maybe true.
touched by as good of industrial designers or something. I have no idea.
They might not be touched by industrial designers. I mean, engineers often
Yeah.
think they can do things that designers can do, and they don't realize that they're missing some steps.
Well, the really big, successful brands for headphones, they're going to have industrial designers for sure.
Yeah, I think that there is something to be said for like home products or products we wear or products that we associate with status in the way that anybody in the world goes around presenting themselves or their space. Cars, right? Shoes, whatever. Those things I do feel like automatically also connect with like a weird status thing within the design community where if you work on those products, you also are like more known, like your design aesthetic is more.
That's like the significance is like built in. People already acknowledge like how much design affects those things.
I mean, shoes is a really interesting example actually, because I feel like shoe designers become like semi-gods. Like people really are over the top tripping on themselves for like the glam of being a shoe designer.
No pun intended.
What is that about? Oh. Yeah, I make too many puns to be a shoe designer.
I think you said it earlier though that like there are objects that the users and consumers of them receive status. That's why they need to be designed with great consideration. And so that kind of perpetuates this idea of like, oh, well, if that's the type of product it is, then you need to have designers. And then you pump resources into it, like the prices of those things continue to inflate. It's kind of proportional, I think.
Yeah. Versus maybe like the other direction, tech things had a lot of money, like the companies were wealthy. So then the companies were putting their money sort of into a lot of different products. And I feel like it became more glamorous to work on those things the more good designed versions came out from like the flood of money on the front end.
That's interesting. So, like, what tech products do you think didn't have the status giving? They just had money, maybe because they were like a giant company or a monopoly.
I mean, I think that like,
Well, there were times when computers were ugly, right?
yeah, computers, like phones, iPods, like being the first versions of this, right? And then, but I even think like home speakers or like sort of smart speakers, like things like that came kind of out of nowhere. But now, if you work on things like that, I do feel like everybody respects your design taste more automatically or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yes, everyone should like work on Bluetooth speaker, that type of stuff. They do this on Render Weekly, by the way. I think it's also interesting that if you are a ID student, how you pick projects to portfolio or like what do you want to work on is I think very much driven on what kind of industrial design projects are popular. What products do you need to like work on conceptually to build a portfolio which is up to date on what's trending?
Well, and there's like an awareness bias, which is like a vicious cycle because if all the other students make the same conceptual products, then that's all you keep seeing because you all look at the same Pinterest, same Behance, same websites, same Yanko design posts, whatever. And then certain products are like gonna be really hidden, unfortunately. I mean, just think of Kat working on adult incontinence products. Like the consumers of those things don't exactly want to go widely advertising, hey, I use this product, but it's important to them. It's important for their life.
Definitely. Yeah, that's an interesting one because there is also like a lot of funding behind it. There's a lot of demand for it, but it's like demand for a product that, yeah, like you're saying, like hopefully never really gets noticed or seen.
Yeah, it definitely is not a product that improves your status, but it functionally improves your life.
I'd really love to know if anything like that has ever won like a red dot,
Oh
you know?
yeah, they did. I
Yeah?
think so.
But it's still proportionally like how many little like pucks that do some kind of tech thing have won a red dot compared to it's probably like a
A
100 to
bug
1.
that does tech.
Tech bucks. I love that.
I'm gonna get so flamed. Like
Oh, people are gonna come
Oh,
for you.
it leads me to another question because like before we started recording, we had this conversation like, as industrial designer, like, do you get pretty privilege? But I would pivot it a little bit. But do you think that the products you work on have pretty privilege? Your work has pretty privilege.
Ah, yes.
Is your work like getting maybe more attention or appreciation than if you worked, for example, like cut for the kind of disposable underwear?
yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine. I think if you present something like that work, if you were trying to get a job at somewhere that doesn't have anything to do with that, they might have this very solemn like, oh, it's a very noble thing to work on, but it doesn't like hype them up or excite them
Yeah.
because it's not a very pleasant topic, right? But it's very necessary. So again, you get that very solemn, like, oh, that was so great of you to work on that. And kind of maybe even people who are like, oh, I can't wait till we can move on to the next product because I don't want to talk about this. I feel like that definitely could happen.
That's fascinating though, because I feel like also some people would probably be like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that product's like life cycle. Like, yeah, I'm sure there is pretty privileged, but I also feel like if you work on a really unusual product or like a product that everybody can automatically be like, damn, that has been overlooked. Like that definitely has its own impressive qualities, you know?
Yes, and smart people who really go into it and want to understand your work and the value you created as designer, because, for example, they consider hiring you, they would go and see it. But on the superficial level, it's very easy to like make impressions with like let's call it shallow work. There's nothing wrong with it, but like if this is your strategy to go through the profession, to like pick things you work based on like how pretty they can be versus are they really needed? Or like sometimes you maybe worked on many different ones, but you would only show off the like nice ones. And if you worked on something industrial, you would like maybe not go and talk about it. But like really good people, I think they would take the work they did for like non-consumer, like very industrial, and still build a great story about it and like show great value of this work and what they managed to accomplish. But it's more difficult than another, what was it? A pack with tech.
Tech puck.
Tech pack.
Well,
Tech
I
pack.
think there's like a relatability issue, right? With some of the stuff you could show certain products, people will already understand it because it's if you design a water bottle, like everyone knows what that is, they know how to use it. There's nothing too complicated about it, and it's easy then to go into the details of like, yes, you know what a water bottle is, so this is why mine's great, or this is the design that I did that this is where my work makes a difference. But then if you do something like you make a fluke analyzer for a complex asset and it's like a very expensive tool that matters a lot to its user, most people don't know what it is, and then when they see it, they might say, well, that looks nice, but there's no place to start the conversation, and you have to work very hard. Because first you have to explain them what it is, what it does. Like, there's a whole preamble and context, and pretty soon they're like many slides deep just to get to the context before you even say how you as a designer impacted the product and why it's good. By then, have you lost them? Like, that's a lot of investment on the part of the person who's looking at it.
I have to say, I'm looking through Red Dot Awards and like it's all just very sleek. There are like a few products in here that feel like they're actually pretty novel or like functional, but it's so much just like lights.
Oh, you know how
How
Reddit
many tech
works.
pucks that do a thing are
But
there?
it's literally just like lamps and chairs, and they're beautiful. But I have a really hard time just imagining that that is like the most impressive stuff that we made this year.
But that those are like kind of easy to assess, aren't they? Because you know what a lamp is, and like you know what a lamp generally looks like. You know what a lamp should look like.
Yeah, I get your point about that. That makes sense.
Maybe they stretch what a lamp could look like.
Right.
Yeah, one of my coworkers has done some like awards judging for IDEA, and it's really interesting to hear his perspective because you get to be with the other judges and hear how they. And every competition, I assume, has a slightly different criteria. That's totally something I want to talk about on the podcast. Actually, we should get someone who's done a lot of
Oh, yeah. Judging.
awards adjudication.
Huh. That sounds interesting. Be like, why do you like lights so much?
Hopefully, they listen to this episode and they think twice about how they're adjudicating.
Mm,
Goddamn tech pucks.
no offense, Margaret.
Yeah.
You get to be one of the sexy designers, so we get to tease you.
Which is also interesting. I could speak to that
Mm-hmm.
because I think when I was younger, sounds like I'm old. I'm not. I was very self-conscious about myself, about work I do, about what I have in portfolio, and I thought that like working for a well-recognized brand kind of gives me the safe space when I don't have to question myself that much. Doesn't mean that like I'm not putting my heart to work or like that I'm not doing a lot of thinking behind it, but I felt that like yeah, I don't have to fend for myself that much, and like no one can question if I'm good enough because I was certainly questioning myself every single day if I'm good enough in what I do.
Yeah, it's like it feels like a little piece of proof, both internally and externally. What has that done for you though? Like the arc of your feelings about that, like your self-consciousness, now that you got the thing, now that you achieved that name brand security.
Yeah, I would say that I finally understood that in every company is exactly the same mass. The fact that you're in a bigger versus smaller, it doesn't mean that they have everything figured out. And there
Mm,
are only good principles and mistakes don't happen. It's basically the same job. I would say advantage is that I work with like a lot of talented people because the industrial design team is big, because the company is big. So yes, I work with a lot of designers and it gives me much more perspectives than if I was in a small company where we have like a 3-person studio, which
yeah,
I also experienced before. So that's like something that is super valuable to me because like I learn every day.
yeah.
Do you like have a big design team because people view your product as like really sexy, and so there's, I mean, obviously it's a huge company with a lot of money, but like it has this draw, so people want to work there, designers want to work there.
Okay, let's be honest. People want to work because there's free food. That was definitely one of my top motivations.
I get free food. You can come work with me.
I also
Yeah,
get
I
free
mean,
food. I
totally,
found free food
yes.
today at the office.
Yeah. Yeah, you have me. Definitely, designers want to work in places which are well founded, where the design is well founded and people understand its value, because it means that like we don't have to have every single day a battle with engineering teams, for example.
I was about to say the exact same thing. I just think it's like, that design just gets to happen there. Like you and the other designers there get to agree on the fact that that is valuable and that's what you're going to focus on. And it feels like it's less like, I don't know, there's just like such a critical mass thing about having enough designers and having enough designers that like are good, honestly, in the same location.
And also, I think the fact that like anywhere where there are like when there is good funding, it means you can do more models to like explore ideas that are risky. That maybe something looked like a bad idea, but you still agreed within the team that like, oh yeah, we would go and explore it. Maybe there is something into it, and like no one would come and say, hey, you wasted your time, you wasted money. It's like no, we have space to do it. We have space to experiment. We have space to validate more than one idea. That's great.
Yeah. I think what's interesting though is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception is that your day-to-day life is more steeped in this culture of like being a cool designer, like having the right persona. Mine is almost the opposite, where it's like working around a bunch of bros and engineers and stuff is like I get to be kind of the funky, creative one that has the eyebrow piercing or whatever, but also like that I don't have to participate in that like designer to designer comparison hardly ever, unless I go to like an event or maybe if I was like interviewing.
No, I wouldn't say that. And I think we also talked about it before that like working in house is kind of like a safe space because like you know each other, you work with same people over and over again. If you work in consultancy and you constantly get new people to work with, and it's not only clients, but then like sometimes you work with the design and engineering team on the client side, and then like you kind of have to impress new people over and over again, and you also need to maintain your value. Like they need to believe that like you're really top-notch designer because they're paying you.
Yeah.
a little bit of that.
I think that's an interesting thing you said about since you're in house, you like know your coworkers and you are like comfortable with them. I definitely think about how at my office, I'm not the only one, but we all just like are constantly outing ourselves as not cool with like various interests or comments on. We like don't agree on products or what we think looks or is cool, and it's nice to have that freedom to discuss it. Obviously, it's really entertaining, and I feel like again, it's more authentic, but I do think that I feel conscious of like, oh, I don't think I would necessarily say this thing or express this opinion around everyone. But with these designers that I know really well, it's okay.
Yeah. I feel less concerned about it around the average person my age because I personally feel like if they're still participating in a very like judgy, like, there's one way to be interesting kind of persona, I just don't really respect that as an adult. But I already admitted to you guys that I do. It's like hilarious to try to interact with my students and just be like really aware that they're younger and hipper than me and just sort of like try to feel like not an old dorky, like out of touch with the trends person. And it's been really funny.
Which is just like a natural progression of like what happens to people as they get older, that they leave the age group that determines popular culture because
Mm-hmm.
no one can freeze time for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But that is an interesting interaction with design. Like, do you guys feel like designers are extra cognizant of that? Like, because we watch trends, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, the thing is, I don't feel that way around all young people. Like when young people in general are cooler than me, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I think it is the combination of like I'm supposed to be teaching them something, and we all are in a design context where like I'm still supposed to be good at this. And so it feels particularly relevant, like how I'm presenting myself to them who are also learning about design. You know what I mean?
So they're not just like, oh, she's a hack.
Kind of, I mean, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with wanting to make sure that they feel like they're in good hands for their education in general. Like it is once again the thing that Margaret mentioned about clients. It's like about credibility, but it just gets a little silly.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about what you think is a silly example. I like that word, that's all.
I just think that probably none of them actually are even looking at me. Like, to be honest
Probably,
with you.
yes. I don't think Kate they care.
Exactly. But it feels like I have to care, or else I might, you know what I mean? Or else they might notice that it's like really careless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the reverse always feels true, that if you aren't paying any attention to it at all, then like everyone would notice or something.
You probably can't really get it right, but you could get it wrong.
Yes. Oh, great. There's no winning. That's what you're saying.
No, but they definitely don't care. I mean, Margaret, yeah, like I feel like you jumped in either to be kind to me or to be like, oh my gosh, get over yourself. But
No, I because like we often think about it that like, oh, what would other people think?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
People don't have time for it. People think about their own lives. Your students think about their own project. Why is it not going the way they wanted? What were they gonna do with
Totally.
internships, career, their ongoing situationships, where is the discounted ramen this week? Really, Kate, the way you dress to
I know.
teach them about prototyping.
I
It's
hope they don't
not,
listen to this.
yes. I wanna think, what did we think of our professors?
I was about to ask you that. Yeah, what do you even remember about your professors?
Yeah, so I have very very good memories, and I don't remember at all how any of them really dressed, but I do remember that we judge them very much as which are working in industry and which are only like close at the university. So who is like teaching industrial design from books, and which of them is actually working on products,
Right.
half time. And like the ones who were coming from professional experience, they were like much more down to earth and they were giving practical advices. The ones who were going with, like Fibonacci golden ratio and Dieter Rams, like sometimes I felt like I'm getting criticized, but I don't think it's gonna help me. And
Yeah.
I was feeling discouraged. And they were more discouraging than the ones that were actually working actively.
We had a mix because I think that that's true, but also we had some guests that like just like their gap in understanding how to like run a classroom or teach or like handle differences of opinion or just sort of like their interpersonal skills to manage like that many people's needs was like a bigger problem, I feel like, than the benefit of their industry knowledge at the time or current work. Like, yeah, their relevance, you know?
Or like you also look at them and you see those for whom industrial design was a passion, and they work at it. This is how they make living. This is what they want to talk about. This is where they can show you day-to-day examples. Oh, we tried this didn't work out, we went that way. Versus people who like don't make products for a long time already, but still, they're professors and they're still like entitled to like talk about it. And I had at the university people who will very passionately talk how they are releasing new packaging for pasta next week versus a guy showing a chair he made in 1975 that got an award in Milan. And it's just not relevant anymore. I want to hear from someone, I want to learn from someone who's super excited about even the small projects that are going on because it's all his life. And he can talk about products, what's good, what's bad, what's driving you, and he will also see the talent in you or like interest and can direct you in what you may be good at versus someone overall judging you that like, oh, the bar is very high and would you ever reach it?
That's super interesting.
Ooh, do you think like the design professors ever exercised any of this like visual judgment and like bias
On the students?
Yeah. Like, do you think there are any professors that are like, oh, that student's not going to be a good designer based on like their interests or the way they look, or some people that are like, yeah, that's a designer.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard not to pick up on like charisma. Like I can think of like a couple times, not my current class. I feel like I know my current class too well to be whatsoever influenced by their clothing. Like I know their personalities, I know their work ethics, like I know how they handle crit. All those things have now eclipsed any initial interactions I had with them, right? Or like initial judgments. That said, I think that like when I've dropped in to different scenarios for like guest crit, someone's charisma matter, like it's noticeable, right? Like, but it carries through a variety of ways. It's like the way that they present themselves verbally and the way that they stand and like maybe their style, but it kind of is like if they just seem like they're confident, right? That kind of is what feels like the more defining. And like I do think that I would have bias to think that a confident person is a better designer, which is flawed. But I think that it's not just like that they look good. I think that it's generally
You
like
have it about everyone, like politicians, best example.
sure, you have it about most people. Yeah.
That's fair.
It's like pretty privilege is one thing, charisma privilege is another thing.
Are we trying to change something? I think maybe the answer is yeah. Like we would want something in the future to be better than it is today. And what does that look like then?
I think it's what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, actually, Ginger. It was like about the building relationship or like building acceptance versus putting things down, being judgmental, being like narrow.
Yeah, so that maybe designers would end up seeing more of each other as like their whole personality instead of just a really tiny slice. Which kind of sounds like an advertisement for our next event.
True.
What's great is that we have an event coming up where you get to know some of the other designers in this community more deeply because they're going to talk about their weird niche hobbies that maybe they wouldn't have told you about at another design event or happy hour that didn't give them this kind of opportunity. We're creating the space for it.
We want to undo some of the buttoned up and let people show their weird obsessive side. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. As always, you can find us on our socials, WID_Seattle on Instagram and our website, beyondraypodcast.com. Come listen again next month.